To begin the second post-lunch session, we are honored to have with us Srimati Uma Ramanathan, who will be delivering the next lecture. I kindly request Srimati Uma Ramanathan ma'am to please come up on the stage. Now I would like to cordially invite Professor Sangeeta ma'am to hand over the memento to Uma ma'am. Uma Ramanathan ma'am is a distinguished expert with decades of experience in mediation and alternate dispute resolution. She enrolled as an advocate in 1980 and has since built an extensive career in the field of law and conflict resolution. She has been actively involved in training advocates and judges all across India since 2008, contributing significantly to the growth of mediation as an effective dispute resolution mechanism. She has also served as an organizing secretary and coordinator for the Tamil Nadu Mediation and Conciliation Center at the Madras High Court, and was also the part of the panel that helped collate the mediation training manual under the instructions of Supreme Court of India. Currently, she serves as the expert coordinator for the IADR under Tata Nani Palkhiwala Chair at Shastra University, and continues to actively promote mediation and conflict resolution through teaching, writing, and training. She's also the author of the book Resolve to Resolve, reflecting her deep engagement with psychological and philosophical dimensions of dispute resolution. We are truly privileged to have such an accomplished speaker today. The lecture for this session is titled Dharmasanket and Prajanya in Dispute Resolution. With great pleasure, I now kindly request Srimati Uma Ramanathan ma'am to deliver the lecture. Thank you, ma'am. The stage is all yours.
Good afternoon. Post-lunch, it's difficult, I know, but I want a little more energy. So you're all alive. Anybody wants to go to sleep, can go to sleep, but please don't snore. Otherwise, I would like a little attention, okay? It's a very hard act to follow today. I thought I was going to come tomorrow, but I got shifted to today. And then after listening to all these people who have had such wide experience and what shall I say, introspective knowledge of all the material that they presented before you, it's very difficult to be more meaningful after that. But I would like to make an attempt because I'm so passionate about mediation, that's all. Now, generally, people talk about it as conflict resolution or understanding what is conflict. Now, can anyone tell me what is your understanding of conflict? Anyone? You like the word conflict? Or do you like the word dissonance better? I would prefer the latter. When we say conflict, already there is a push about something hard. And I don't like the word conflict, but unfortunately that is the word used. And unfortunately, ADR is also used as to say that there is an alternative dispute resolution method. Why should we have something alternative? Because everybody is only looking at justice, right? So, just to wake us up a bit, if all of you can just close your eyes till I tell you to open your eyes. Just close your eyes. Imagine you're walking on the main road here, outside the college. You're trying to get home or get wherever you want in a hurry. And suddenly a huge container lorry swishes past you very fast. You haven't noticed the lorry coming, but suddenly you hear one huge sound and you see the lorry going past you very fast. Just try to see how you're feeling when the lorry passes so fast. You haven't anticipated this huge vehicle coming there. And in a hurry, you try to move away and you fall into a ditch of dirty water. Now, how do you feel? And then when you're so when you get so irritated by all the dirt and you come out, you see a person whom you don't generally like in college going on the latest bike, new bike. Now, what is your feeling? You pause, you keep quiet, or what do you do? Now you can open your eyes. You were not going through this at all physically, but what happened when I told you to imagine this? You had the same feeling when we started, or did you go through different feelings when I said these things? What happened? Why did you feel it? It didn't happen to you at all. But when you heard some swishing past, you were afraid. When you fell into a deep pond then you felt disgust. Then when you saw the person you don't like, then you see going on the best vehicle possible, still further. Why? Why did it happen? Because of all the feelings that go in through you. So every person, whether we call it conflict or dissonance, when they have a difference with somebody else, either because of a property or because of a conflict or because of anything else, what they are going through is different feelings. And so when they go to a lawyer, they may be telling, as the earlier speaker also was saying, it'll be facts. Facts from his or her point of view, or facts or the narrative that he or she chooses to tell the lawyer also. So when somebody comes to court, there is a narrative there, but we don't know whether it is the actual narrative or whether it is a narrative that that person wants to believe in. And so what happens is, when they have a confrontation with the other person who is involved in that situation, mostly it is because of these feelings attached to those narratives that they react, or they tend to say something which invites a reaction. And so that takes it to the next level, beyond which those feelings themselves will alone drive the whole narrative after that, and there won't be a proper understanding at all. So, if you see this, what does this picture show you? Mahabharata, yeah. Everyone knows that. Then you see Arjuna sitting, kneeling in front of Krishna. Why should he go till that point to ask Krishna, what should I do? He could have asked it when he was at home or before the war started, anywhere else. Why did he do that? Why did he do that? See, that is the point where he has to make a decision. So today we were talking so much about dharma from the morning. What is dharma? Everyone said you can't explain, you can't define it at all. You can't put it into words. It is something that is very natural in our country to understand, because we feel what is dharma. Just like an anger or just like happiness, dharma is also something which is imbibed, which is experienced. And that is why when Arjuna chooses to ask or express his concerns, it is at a point when he sees everyone around, both the opposite army and his own army. He knows the strength of his army. He has absolute faith in Krishna. But Krishna does not tell him what to do. Krishna just says, this is the right way. This is what will lead to harmony. It is your choice now. So then, this shows that it is this person's, Arjuna's, responsibility to choose and to do what is right. Just as the Kaushika story told you in the morning, it is not necessary to just follow a rule. Yes, there are laws codified, you cannot go beyond that. But then, when something has to be done, then you will have to, for example, recently I was doing a mediation of a very prominent hospital in Chennai, and a doctor who had got into employment signing a contract. Now, in all these commercial hospitals, they get paid very well, but then they say you should not leave our services before this time, you should not go to another hospital within 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, all sorts of conditions. So when they get a offer which with a good salary, automatically they sign the contract. But then when they have a problem, they say, no, it's a big corporate, no, they asked me to sign. I didn't understand. But then you can't get out of that contract because you've signed it. Now, taking responsibility for that action. Understanding the consequences of what you have got yourself into. That is where this Dharma Sankat comes. Because that is where they start wondering, what is it that is lined up against me? Or what is it that I have to really see? Are they looking at the larger picture? Now, most of them don't understand what is a larger picture because there is a lot of confusion, because it's easy to say dilemma. But why do we have a dilemma? We have a dilemma because we don't like what is being said in front of us, what is staring at us. We want something which we think will bring us satisfaction or will bring us joy. But then that again depends on the context. It is, say, for example, if a man had to rush his wife or child to the hospital and he was immediately asked to pay 10 lakhs or get an injection for a certain amount of money for which he doesn't have the money, but then they say you have to bring it within the next hour, he doesn't have it. He goes to the pharmacy to get the medicine and the pharmacist says, unless you pay, you cannot get this medicine. But then when he tries to explain and the pharmacist doesn't accept, if the medicine is on the counter and he's in a hurry because he knows that within 1 hour he has to take the money or the medicine back, he will grab it and take it. Now, would you call him a thief or what would you call him? He's trying to save the life of his loved one, his wife or parent or child or somebody, and that's very important for him to take that particular injection within the time there. You would say, how can he do it? He has not paid for it. But then within the next 2 hours after giving the injection or the medicine there, he somehow manages and gets the money and comes and gives it to the pharmacist. What would you say then? He would say that he was not, maybe he didn't pause to explain, or maybe the pharmacist would not have given him time also. But if he has done that, we would look at it in a different way. Now that is where this understanding of justice and what is it that one has to do in a particular situation, what is the choice they have, and what is it that they can look at and accept. Herbert Spencer calls it as satisficing, not satisfaction, satisficing. So what is the satisficing solution that can happen there? Now, dharma, as we have seen from the morning, is about being objective or understanding what will keep harmony. But then when we are bewildered, when we are confused, why are we like that? Why does Arjuna go on his knees at that point of time? So that is mostly because there is a bondage, where there's an attachment to something or there is an aversion to something. Most of the confusions happen because of either raga or dvesha. So what we have to understand first is that what is it that is anchoring them to that position? To do that, we must be aware of what is happening to all these people when they are caught in a confused state. Now, generally when the word jnana is used, what do you understand by the word jnana? I will make this available for everyone, so please don't keep staring at that. I just wanted you to know this will be there. That's all. So what do you understand by the word jnana? Knowledge. Okay. Then everyone has knowledge by coming into college? Or after 4 years of whatever you are studying? Okay, from this morning, you have heard enough about dharma. Can you say you have knowledge of dharma? Why? Are we really listening to every word? We can't. We can't remember, we can't listen to every word, right? But we have a basic understanding of what it is. So, what they say in the Buddhist tradition is that first is that you must be able to be conscious, you must be able to see, you must be able to hear, you must understand, you must be able to discern. You must understand what is there in that frame. What is the potential there, or what is it that is triggering that particular situation? Then if you get the facts, if you get clarity, then there is knowledge, there is correct understanding. Only when there is correct understanding, what happens is you make a ethical choice. That's where Arjuna comes in. After listening to everything, there is a little clarity. He is able to say, okay, for this reason, I have to fight this war. So that only when there is this discernment, he will be able to choose wisely, or any one of us will be able to choose wisely. But is that enough? Just, going through a course for 4 years, would it make you capable to handle the rest of your life with just that knowledge? No. You must be able to introspect on that. You must be able to analyze what you have learned. You must be able to apply it in various ways. So that has to be a sort of a penetrative understanding. Only when there is a penetrative understanding, what will happen is you will understand the moral and ethical issues involved. You will understand what can be transformed, and how it can be done. And that prajna is what is very important. So to move from dharma sankat to prajna, it is not just knowledge. What we need to first do is identify the feelings that are going through, understand the characters, the nature of those people, understand the context, understand how they are perceiving it, and above all, understand the kind of communication that is happening between them. Now, when you are drafting certain things, you will learn by the end of your course, you will learn how to draft a plaint or a petition. Now, what are you going to do in that? You're going to listen to the party, state the facts that they are telling you, and then there will be a cause of action. You will try to base the whole structure on the basis of the cause of action and frame a prayer also. So what happens is it comes under a straitjacket. They may not have expressed everything that they wanted, or they may feel that they want to express something more, but you would say, under the statute, this is the relief that you are entitled to. This is how we will have to frame it. So what happens is, what is presented in court is a format. And the evidence that is given later is only based on that particular format that is presented before court. Any contra evidence given is also only to discredit this particular frame. So ultimately, what is the truth? Even the person who came to the court will not know what is the truth. So is that what they are looking at? Or what do they really want from that? So when we are looking at that, what we have to understand is that most of that is what the Yoga Sutra says. First is that, because as I told you, because of the passion, there is a lot of, because of the feelings, there is a lot of a passionate reaction. And so what happens is the person becomes restless. There is a lot of distraction. So we are not able to really grasp the real situation. So when you felt that the lorry was passing through, you don't even pause to see whether the lorry is going, but because you've seen the lorry going at that speed, you think he's a rash driver and some harm could be done. So you move in a hurry. You don't notice that there is dirty water there, but you fall because you haven't noticed all this. So what happens is we don't look at the whole picture. We presume certain things, or apprehending something, we tend to do an act which could land us in something else. And the second state that the Yoga Sutra talks about is, it could be inertia. What happens if you just avoid the situation? Somebody says, this is, even if it is a partition suit, say, the elder brother says, I have worked so hard, I sent money to the father, and father bought this property, so I am alone entitled to the property. And the younger brother who is trying to claim a share, he says, okay, this elder brother is always like that, and the parents have always pampered the elder brother. They won't listen to me, so I have to go away. If he keeps quiet, what will happen? Is he going to be happy? Is he going to be accepting totally what is happening there? He will definitely not like. It may not show today, but it will show in some other manner later. Sometimes it is also because of distraction. Most of the time we are looking at our iPad or something else. So what happens if somebody is talking to you, you say yes, Are you really listening to them? No. So have you really taken in whatever was being said? Even reading a newspaper, do we really read through the whole thing? We don't. Why? Because there's so many things going on in our mind. So unless we are focused, unless we are able to concentrate, we will not be able to get the true gist. We will not be able to get the larger picture. And that is why in ADR, or mediation at least, the training helps us to shift from whatever is bothering that person. They understand that they have to take ownership of the problem. They have to make the choice. They have to live with that choice. And for that, they have to be focused and to learn to listen and to understand and to take a decision. So only when they are able to control their distraction or their feelings, they will be able to get the larger picture and able to understand. So unless we understand the mind states, we won't be able to understand why the party is, sticking on to a particular position, why they are anchored in that claim alone, why they are not able to move from there at all. See, sometimes it is also because they want to be the winner there. They don't want to be the loser. Most of the time, even when we get our marks, why do we want to say, I got this mark, this person got only this mark? Why do we want to go home and say, no, I got so much, no, but those fellows only got so much? Why do we want to say that? because we want to be seen in a better light. We also always want to win. We always want to make a profit. We don't want to be the loser. We don't want to take a risk at all. So most of the decisions, most of our reactions, or most of our actions at least, are because of these mind states. And so we have to understand what is the mind state in which they come in. That is why training today, I feel, is not enough just to talk about conflict and negotiation and all that. It has to talk about the mind states and talk about personalities, about feelings. And that is more so in our knowledge systems. Now, main thing that is said about clarity or obstacles to clarity, because we've been talking about looking at the larger frame. Generally, it is said when we are greedy, when we are angry, what happens is that tends to create a veil over what we are looking at. So that is called as mala. So we are not able to see the true picture because of our expectation, because of our feelings. Sometimes it is because of our fear also. Sometimes, as I said earlier, because of indifference. More so because it is, this cannot happen to me. How can this happen to me? And because I am the elder son, this must happen to me. I am the superior, this must happen to me. So parties will be coming in with these kind of expectations or these kind of projections, and we have to go back to understand what is the nature of their thinking. The feelings and thought processes go together. So most important is to understand first how they are sensitive, how they realize, how they are looking at these things, what is the kind of imagination or what is the kind of narrative they are building, what is the emotion, and what is it they are looking at to move above all this. For that, the most important thing, as we have been saying from the morning, is first we have to learn to listen. How many of us can say we listen? Do we listen to our parents? Do we listen to our friends? Anyone? Can we say always we listen to every word that is said? Why? Okay, when we say listen, generally in communication, what they say is active listening. But empathetic listening and all that, critical listening and all that. I think what we have to do is more of authentic listening. Only if we care for somebody, only if we care about what is going to happen, we will really listen with our heart. That is why there is a phrase called Sahridayavada. What they say is, unless we resonate with the other, unless we are able to feel what the other person is going through, unless we understand the intention of what they are trying to say, we will not be able to really, have a proper conversation with them or really have any effective conversation with them. Also, to understand the situation, as a mediator, the mediator must learn to switch off their own thinking process, reactive process, and be able to listen to what is being said by the parties in front of them. Sometimes when the parties start saying the narrative, even when they say, they will realize that what they are saying is a narrative that was asked to be said by the lawyer, and they will come forward with whatever had really happened to them. So that opportunity for authentic listening, both by the parties and the mediator, is very, very essential. And for that, we have to develop the Shravana skills. The next is contemplation. Why should we contemplate? If you have just listened to that, enough, I have listened, I have understood. Now, why do we need contemplation? Anyone? Do we go back in the evening and look at our textbooks and study whatever lectures we heard in the morning? We don't want to do it, but we do it at the time of exam. Why? Because we'll have to answer the question paper. So that means we have to do a little more reading, have to little more thinking so that it sticks in our brain. So we need to reflect. Only when we reflect, we will be able to discern and discriminate. And for that to understand, yes. So when we are listening to the other person and the other person is saying us, whatever happened, we understand that though my stand is like this, when this person has said the facts in a particular way, I understand that there's a possibility that is how he could have understood. So I don't think this should happen. So let me see what can be done in this particular situation. Only when there is contemplation or reflection, what will happen is there'll be a true assimilation. And that is Nididhyasana. So all this has to be understood because the Bhagavad Gita itself says, first is when we see something. So imagine when, again this pharmacy incident itself, When this person grabbed the injection and went away, what happened? The pharmacist, when he's looking at it, what will he see? He will just see a person grabbing the injection and going away. Now it is his property. So he thinks, oh, this man has taken away my property. He's already attached to the value of that property. So he doesn't want to lose it. He's looking at this context and he's only seeing that somebody is taking away of what is of value to him. Now he wants to make sure that he will get the value. He wants to grab that person and get hold of, but there's too much crowd, he loses him. So that desire is there. Once he is not able to catch him, what happens? He's very angry both with himself and with that person because he feels he's cheated. And then he thinks, oh, this man has gone away. I've lost this. This injection is 2 lakhs rupees. I've lost this 2 lakhs rupees. There's no reason at that point of time to believe, but that is an inference that will happen automatically. So what we have seen, that is because we are conditioned by various things that we have gone through in life experiences, and because of which we tend to infer that this is what has happened. And this will lead to a confusion that will lead to downfall. And this is the trajectory that happens in any narrative. So we have to understand that unless we pause to find out what is happening through this person, we will not be able to understand what is happening to them. Now, to understand that, we have to understand what is the emotions that they are going through. I don't want to go into all that, but there are basic emotions and there are transient emotions. They are divided into that, and Natya Shastra talks about a lot. And what they are saying basically is that most of it is because of our experience. That is Anubhava. So what we have experienced in a particular context will condition us to react in a particular way. So mostly what happens is when you feel that a lorry is passing by at a speed, you already apprehend danger. There was no real danger at all. It's like this. When a child is playing on have anyone of you seen that rocking horse, wood horse? The child plays on that. The child really believes it is a horse. The child does not know it's a toy or it is made of wood. Why? For all that the child wants is the enjoyment of rocking on that horse. And the child knows that riding on a horse means it's giving him some sort of a, pleasure. That's all. But is it real horse? No. And even if you tell the child this is not a horse, the child will not believe it because he's going through that experience. So what happens is most of the time we've already concluded in our mind a particular frame. And that is how people will be coming into the mediation or any conflict space also. So what they have to understand is that, for any resonance or for anyone to really be able to relate to the other person, what we should learn is to be a spectator. We are all spectators here. We are sitting here with our eyes wide open. But can we say we are all very objective about the whole thing? No. To be a spectator means we should be there for them at the same time, not be totally attached to whatever they are going through. We should be able to observe. We should be able to help them get a dispassionate view about the whole thing. We should give an emotional response, but that should not be something which goes out of the way where they feel, oh yeah, whatever I'm going through is the worst. I am a victim here. The world is against me. It's such a horrible feeling that I'm having and my fate is like this. All that kind of a thing. And you go on hugging them and saying, oh, it's so bad for you. Then they will feel that they are entitled to that kind of a feeling. Instead of that, if you I understand that this has happened to you. Your brother has taken away the property. But what were the words that he said to you? Do you think we can have a talk? Do you think we can approach somebody who can talk to him? So there is an emotional response. They have vented out their feelings. Then they come to a state where they start thinking practically about the whole thing. And that is where all the veils that covered their thinking has been removed. And then they start seeing. At one point of time when both of them are able to see what is practical, then they will be able to understand what is possible for them. So in this hospital issue also, the doctor was repeatedly saying, why should I pay? They are a Christian institution. I'm also a Christian. So they must have Christian behavior and all that. I said, all that is fine. But then you signed the contract. Whether you are entitled to, they are entitled to liquidated damages and all that is a legal issue. But if it goes to a court or if it goes to an arbitrator, what will happen? The lawyer can tell you. But then, do you want to go through all this? Or do you want your reputation to be saved so that in the next hospital, they give you a decent place and decent salary? They don't think this person is a very difficult person. she will go on signing contracts and she will leave the job, or, you get that kind of a reputation. So then she was able to see what could happen in the future. And then there was a kind of settlement. So what I'm saying is that what we have to understand is, in mediation or any conflict resolution or any, settlement that happens, there must be a resonance. There must be a feeling that they have been understood. They have explored all the possibilities. They have looked at the options and they were able to evaluate. And for that, there must be an effective communication. That communication must be just, must be fair, must be meaningful, and must be productive. So, in Mahabharata, apparently this, as a lady ascetic Sulabha tells King Janaka, what are the right forms of communication and what are flaws, that could impact communication. There's a whole lot of things on that. But basically what she tries to say is that it should be concise, it must be precise, it must be, it should not be very verbose, it must convey the intention of that person. And for that, she says, these are the 4 qualities that must be there. Unless it is there, it cannot be an effective conversation at all. Otherwise, it will make sort of allegations or create innuendos which could mar what was being tried to be explained to the other person. Now, when we are talking about communication, now Natya Shastra has a lot about it because it deals with bhava. And there's one professor, I will just go into that because I want to answer some questions. He has created a model of communication. And he, of course, the Sadharnikaran is already there in the Shastras, but what he has formulated this model where he says, Sahridayata will come only when there is a speaker and a listener on the same level. Now, why do you need people on the same level? See, I'm going to say something and you're going to listen. When you came into this seminar in the morning, you only knew the topic. Some of you may have known what is Dharma, some of you may have not known. But then when you're coming in here, I have to sit through this workshop for 2 days, something to listen on Dharma Shastra, that's all, right? If it was not made interesting by all the speakers here today, would you have sat through the whole thing? So then, you were on the same level, or you were willing to come to that level where you would be able to grasp something from whatever the speakers were saying, right? So, there must be a level in which both the speaker and the listener can exchange information and be understood. And the next thing he says is that from whatever is the information that is exchanged, the first thing that you have to notice is the bhava or the emotion. If I say it in a very angry mode, then I have reason to infer as a mediator that this person is upset because of certain things. Can I have them across the table at the same time? Should I listen to them separately? Or should I ask questions in such a way that I draw out the real information from them? So I must have a strategy for talking to them. So first, unless I understand the mood and the emotion. For example, if on a lighter vein, I will tell you, in a matrimonial matter, the husband was coming from somewhere near Rameshwaram. And so he used to insist that he would come and his train would leave at 2 o'clock or something. So he had to be left by lunchtime. So one session he came and he agreed certain properties would be given for his children and his wife and all that. And I told him, go and check with your lawyer, talk to him, and then come back next time. Once you're very sure, we can draft the agreement. So he went off. Next time he came. And then he started again saying, like when he started in the beginning, no, madam, this lady is a very difficult lady. I can't give anything. My sons are useless. I cannot give everything. So I said, I understand you're trying to change. Your mind has changed. But then last time when you came, you said this. He absolutely refused. He said, no, madam, I did not tell you at all. You're trying to fool me. He was very angry and he shouted and all that. I said, I can understand. You can change your mind because you've not signed the agreement. But last time you did offer this and I told you to go and check with your lawyer, discuss and come back. Then he came, he said, madam, what time was it when I said that? Then I said, it must have been around noon because you usually leave by 1, you wanted to catch your train. That's what, madam. I am a diabetic. My sugar level would have been down. You got me to say something when my sugar level was down. Because of that, I agreed. Now, I'm thinking very practically, I'm telling you. I said, you can think about it, you can tell me, but then don't blame it on the sugar alone. But that is how they would do. And we have to catch their mood also. So unless we catch that emotion, we will not be able to talk to them. Also, the way they talk. How many of you are Malayalis here? Malayalis, okay. Initially, I used to go a lot to Kerala. Okay, I know a little bit of Malayalam. And then one of these trainees, you came and said, Ravile Kanum. See, I know Ratri is night. Ravile morning, I didn't know. Okay, so when he came and said, Ravile Kanum, okay, first time I left it. Second time he said, Ravile Kanum. I said, why is this man coming to see me in the night? Then I realized Ravile is morning. So these are nuances in communication. Unless we understand how do I encode it unless I know that Ravila is morning? Otherwise, I would be only making a false deduction from that. That was what happened. So not only is understanding the emotion important, understanding or decoding that information, understanding their expression, then getting the correct information. So that is the Sandesh. Now, after we move from that, we also have to understand what is a channel of communication. Today, because we have online transactions, there's a lot of literature saying the size of the font, the color of the font is also important. So, and if somebody sends a mail on Friday evening at 5 o'clock saying, can we meet on Tuesday to finalize the contract? Then it means that person only wanted to clear the desk. He did not want to meet on Tuesday. But if he had sent the same message on Tuesday saying, shall we meet next Tuesday? It means he really wanted to have a meeting next Tuesday. So what is this? We have to understand the channel of communication also. So Sarani is important. Most important is Rasaswadana. We must be able to experience that feeling. We must be able to understand and we must be able to truly get what is it that they are going through. Only then we will be able to help them. Also, we have to understand what are the barriers or noises, that is the dosha. And then the context, of course, in what situation it happened. So he has, and feedback ultimately. Now, Professor Nirmala Mani has a course in Kathmandu University. He is part of the media studies there. And actually, I wrote to him after listening to one of his lectures. And he did do an online course for about 5 of us because we asked. And it was very interesting to see how they had combined all Indian knowledge systems and Natya Shastra. And there he talks about Sahradevada and he says, unless we are able to resonate, we cannot really make that other person feel that they are understood and they have to move from the position they are stuck in. So this is just to give you a bird's eye view of how our knowledge or how our concepts can help in ADR. And today, I personally feel that instead of just talking about what are the root causes of conflict or what are the different kinds of power in negotiation or what are the different kinds of communication, verbal, non-verbal or, direct, systemic and all that, we have to go through this kind of training to make it more experiential because language itself is experiential. Communication is experiential. When somebody says something, we go through an experience. If you go to a friend's house and they are leaving for a particular concert, say, for which they've bought very expensive tickets, and your friend opens the door, and because you've come at the last minute and they are in a hurry to go to that concert, they can't afford to go late because very expensive tickets. But then they open the door and seeing you, they say, vada, ulla vandu okkaru. Will you really feel like going in? But at the same time, if that person says, because I'm in such a hurry, you will understand and go away. But if they had got you inside just because you have come in, and the way they talk to you, you will feel uncomfortable also. So what we have to understand is, how can we relate to that experience that the other person is going through? For that, Shravana, Manana and all are important. We have to understand that the thought process, first it starts as a thought because of our memory or because of our conditioning. And the thought to get verbalized goes through a process of this experiencing of feelings. And that is what those persons who are caught in a situation which they are not able to understand and they ask a third party to resolve it for them are going through. So unless we move from our position where we think we know everything, but able to sit with them and have that kind of a Sahridayavada, there will not be a proper satisfying solution for them at all. So basically, I would say going through all your courses, all your classes are important. Just as important is to understand feelings of the other person, how to communicate, be understood, and to understand the other person. I hope I have given you a bird's eye view of this. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
How important do you see is the education of Samskrita Sahitya for students of law schools? And can you as well say make a recommendation that Samskrita Kavyas, which actually deal with most of what you mentioned, and also give contextual kind of formulation as to how bhava can be understood, and in some sense we are afflicted with bhava daridrya, so to ensure that say there's this sense of bhava that is instilled in every child, so that will be something that what are the ways and means that you see?
I'm very thankful you asked me this, sir. Professor Sangeeta knows that in the programs that we did, I have tried to inculcate this, and I've got speakers from other places, other Sanskrit scholars to talk about it. Unfortunately, Mr. C.L. Ramakrishnan passed away last week. Rumba sad. He was in coma for about 55 days and he passed away. He was a great help for me. I have been trying to develop a program. That was another thing. A lot of people use psychodrama today. In many coaching and other programs, they use psychodrama. And I think psychodrama is just as rasaswada, nothing else. All that you have to do is relate with the other person. That's all. Experience it and relate to the other person. And I think, yes, stories that were told by our grandmothers when we were young, that helped us to create some kind of values and understand what we should do. And I think that opportunity many of the children today lose. One. Second is from schools. They must have some kind of a program where it combines art or whatever, even drawings or music or something else, through which they learn all this. And as you said, all the folklore or stories, if they are given as part of their education system, and today talking to people above 20 is not going to help at all. I have realized lawyers who come for training are stuck in where they are because they only want to litigate. And I feel people should be tuned to this from a very young age. And I've gone around talking to schools, but it's very difficult. They don't accept it. Pardon, sir? One particular Vidya Mandir, I can even name that, Vidya Mandir Adayar, I went, and I met parents and teachers, and the parents said, no, what is the subject that my child can study to get success? I said, what do you mean by success? She said, he must get the highest salary. I said, then I can't talk to you. That's how it.
Ma'am, just a question.
Yeah.
How does one as a mediator or as a litigator show empathy but without letting their experience affect their decision or their advice to the client?
That is the main skill that the mediator has to learn. Now, what did Krishna do? Arjuna was his greatest friend. Now, why did Krishna not tell him this is what you have to do? Kill those bloody fellows because they have done so much harm to you. Why didn't he say that? Because that conscious decision has to come from that person. Tomorrow he will not blame Krishna. You told me I killed him. It's because of you only I killed all my family. Now it is his decision. So taking ownership is very, very important. That is why, see, as a mediator, yes. As anybody, when you're listening to somebody, because you have had your experiences, all that will come in. But then we have to, even your body language should not show. For example, one of my colleagues, he had 2 young grandchildren, and in one of the matrimonial matters, the claim of the husband was that the wife used to have a personal instructor, gym trainer, to come home, and at about 12 o'clock, she'll send the child with the maid downstairs to play in the sun, because the trainer was with her, and he, of course, suspected adultery. Now, when he was saying this, apparently this colleague who has 2 grandchildren, his body stiffened a bit because he has children of that age at home. The next day, the person came and said, I don't want this mediator because he's against me. He didn't utter a word, but that body stiffening was noticed by that person. So we have to be very careful about how we sit there. We have to be there for them. There's one lovely advertisement which says Hum Hai Na for a bank or something, I remember seeing. So we should be able to give that kind of a space for it. It may not end in an agreement, but then they will, especially I'll tell you, where there was this 14-year-old boy who was sexually assaulted by his father. We couldn't get into an agreement, but the mother and child came and thanked me for listening to them. And I think that's the success of that mediation. So yes, we have to stay a little apart. We should not go that extra mile. It may be serious assault also, but we have to be very, very careful. We don't cross that line. There's a Lakshman Rekha there, definitely. Any other questions? I think I took more time.
Thank you, ma'am, for the enlightening and engaging lecture. We truly appreciate the insights you've shared with us, especially the importance of having deeper understanding of factors like emotional standing and social circumstances of parties in a mediation by the mediator. Also, as a mediator, to have an unbiased mindset, effective communication, and authentic listening to achieve the purpose of mediation. Thank you, ma'am.